I've made an argument, and I've stuck to this argument. And it's been an argument that I think is right, hence the reason I make it. If we spend twice as much for healthcare, it might be more than that, but let's say twice as much for healthcare as any other nation around the world, and we have worse outcomes. If I'm not mistaken, we're ranked like 30th or 30-something around in the world under Cuba with in regards to healthcare and the way that they rank healthcare. We spend twice as much. And it's not a situation where we use twice as much healthcare, meaning Americans just use more healthcare. That's not the case at all. We use healthcare to the degree that other countries use it. Worse outcomes. People in debt. People making the choice between medication versus food. And yet, twice as much for healthcare. If that's true for healthcare, where we spend twice as much but get dramatically worse outcomes, we spend $1 trillion on the military, or nearly $1 trillion on the military. Why do you believe that you're getting the same bang for your buck? Meaning, if in a situation where you're paying twice as much for healthcare and is getting a worse outcome, why do you believe that the military is somehow separate and distinct from the same process of healthcare? Yes, a different institution. But wouldn't the rule hold true? And not just wouldn't the rule hold true, wouldn't it be to some degree worse? Because that's the organizations that's less interrogated, and for the most part where money is dumped by congressmen in some situations in weapon systems that we don't need, and in some situations weapon systems that the military hasn't even asked for. A case that illustrates this point pretty well: the Air Force spent $1,200 for a hat cup. You can call it a coffee cup, but it was made clear that, well, it heats up more stuff than just coffee. Chuck Grassley asked, why the hell are you spending $1,280 for a coffee cup? And is there another alternative for that cup? Let's take a look at the exchange and see if you can discern an answer here. There wasn't one. The United States Air Force can't explain why it spent $1,280 on a coffee cup. Chuck Grassley finally receives a response from the Air Force on why it was spending exorbitant amounts on a coffee cup. The Air Force has been using quote-unquote hat cups, metal cups similar in size to the French press, which costs $1,280. Taxpayer money. Taxpayer money that wasn't going to better roads, wasn't going to making sure bridges were upkept. Your hard-earned tax dollars. How hard is it for you to make a buck? What do you do for your job? And how much of your worth is taken and given to the United States government in the form of tax dollars? $1,280 for hat cups. The money wasn't going to roads. It wasn't going to making sure bridges were upkept. It wasn't going to make sure the water in Flint, Michigan didn't have lead in it. It wasn't going to make sure that your kids would have health care, or that kid will be able to go to school without having all that debt on their back, or the expansion of Social Security. No. Being dumped into the military, after which it was dumped into $1,280 for coffee cups. My point here is, certainly, there are going to be other items like this. It puts you in the mind of the $20 Tylenol at a hospital, right? Where this exorbitant cost for minor items that shouldn't cost that much. There is no place on earth where a coffee cup should cost $1,280. But the waste that's associated with the military, with all of the money that's dumped and the lack of oversight in the way that the money is spent. Just because they're spending nearly $1 trillion in the military, why on earth do you believe you're getting the same bang for your buck? And why do you believe that this will be dramatically different than healthcare, where you spend twice as much, but worse outcomes than pretty much any other industrialized nation? Let's keep going. The Air Force has been using hat cups, metal cups similar in size to the French press, which cost $1,280. Over the past 3 years, the service has spent more than $300,000 on these hat cups. And again, certainly you know, if there's one thing like this, there's going to be all sorts of things dumped into that $719 billion budget that is just being wasted. Senator Chuck Grassley finally received a response to questions he's asked the Air Force on why it was spending more than $1,000 on an in-flight coffee cup, and he's not at all satisfied with their explanations. I bet he's not. While I appreciate that the Air Force is working to find innovations that would help save taxpayer dollars, it remains unclear why I cannot find a cheaper alternative to a $1,280 cup, Grassley said in a statement on Friday. Government officials have the responsibility to use taxpayer dollars efficiently. Too often, that is not the case. I intend to pursue this issue further. Earlier this month, Grassley sent a letter to the Air Force Security Heather Wilson in which he inquired about why the Air Force calls hat cups, metal cups similar in size to the French press, which he said cost services $56,000 over the last 3 years. As it turns out, it's even worse. The Air Force spent $300,000. Ironically, the exorbitant price tag caught Grassley's eye soon after the Air Force published a public affairs story lauding a 3D printing innovation one of the squadrons made, which developed a cheaper solution to the problem of a cup handles breaking off. So you paid $1,280 for a cup, and the thing wasn't even stable enough to not have the handle break off. That's great. In the past, if an airman dropped the cup and the handle broke, it cost more than $1,200 to replace it. With 3D printing, a new handle could be made for 50 cents. That's great. But why were you paying the $1,280 for a cup? In response, Wilson, which led Grassley earlier this month to ask, why the hell were you spending that much money on a damn coffee cup in the first place? Yeah, good on Grassley. In response, Wilson wrote Grassley an October 17th letter and said that he was right to be concerned about the high cost of the spare parts, while explaining that some of the contractors who supply the cups have gone out of business or don't manufacture them. But when you get down to the question and answer portion of the letter, it's a head-scratcher. The 60th Aerial Port Squadron at Travis Air Force Base has reportedly spent $56,000 on replacing hat cups since 2016. How many cups have been purchased by the Air Force during this time frame, and what is the total cost of these purchases? Wilson, the item in question is a specifically manufactured electronic water heater that plugs into aircraft systems. Because it connects to the aircraft, replacements require the FAA airworthiness certification. The Air Force has purchased 391 of these items since 2016 for a total of $326,785. Grassley, what cheaper alternatives for providing hot coffee to crews have been explored by the Air Force? Is this particular cup truly necessary, or are there other more cost-effective options available? Wilson, in 2018, I directed the creation of the Air Force Rapid Sustainment Office to further explore agile manufacturing, 3D printing, cold spray, digital modeling, to develop and deliver parts at a fraction of the cost using traditional manufacturing. General Goldfin and I also directed this new office to complete a review of procurement and proactively identify items we may produce or overpriced parts we need to stop buying without the impact of the mission. The Air Force has recently demonstrated the capability of a 3D printing replacement handles for this item at a fraction of the cost. That's a lot of words. In other words, we haven't explored cheaper alternatives to this cup besides the 3D printing that you already know about. $300,000 for cups. Although the Air Force official who spoke to the task and purpose in the past took pains to point out that technically it's not a coffee cup, it's a hot cup that heats up all manner of liquids, there may be an alternative to spending $300,000 on a cups not yet considered. Maybe the airmen at the KC-10 can heat up their ramen noodles in the barracks before they take off. And if they needed coffee while in flight, perhaps the Air Force can spring for the $17 it costs for Dunkin' Donuts or box of Joe, which comes with cups, which hold hot liquids. I have this metal cup that keeps liquids hot all day. It's a little cup that costs maybe $3. That big. You can put all manner of liquids in it. It would keep it cold or hot all day. I don't know how long their flights are, but $300,000 of taxpayers' dollars wasted on hot cups. On hot cups. My point here is, do you honestly believe that this is the only item that is being wasted? We spend nearly $1 trillion of our worth on murdering and killing, and in this case, buying coffee cups that are breathtakingly overpriced. The contractors that we pay, do we really have scrutiny over how much we pay for those contractors? We are spending tons of God knows how much money. And are we getting the bang for the buck for what we're spending it on? I strongly suspect that answer is no. And looking at the fact that we're spending this much, I'm inclined to believe we're getting, from the standpoint of the public, hosed. Our money is being wasted. And by the way, the Air Force is asking for more money. I shit you not. Now, to be fair to them, they're asking for more money in retrospect, dealing with what they're saying, what Trump wants them to do from the standpoint of dealing with China. But fact is, your military is bloated. And the idea that we're spending money like this is nonsense. World's greatest waste of, how can you say you drunk from a 3D printing mug from the world? Oh, geez, why can't I see this? All right. How else can you spill coffee drunk from a 3D printing mug of the world's greatest budget waste and budget accomplished? Our crotch is 60,000 feet. That's the best idea ever. You know, the funny part, let me read this again. How else can you spill coffee drunk from a 3D printed mug? World's greatest budget waste and budget accomplished. Our crotch at 60,000 feet. That's the best idea ever. Ever. There's a story, I don't know if it's true or not. It might be true, I think it's true, that NASA was having a problem getting an ink pen that wrote upside down. Because when they were, there's no up or down when you're in space. There's no, there's gravity, but the gravity is not sufficient. You're essentially falling around the Earth, in which case there's no up or down. And they spent all of this money, all of these millions of dollars, they had an ink pen that wrote upside down. I actually bought that ink pen when I was buying stuff from NASA. The Soviet Union used a pencil. Soviet Union used a pencil. Sometimes when a bunch of money is dumped into a process, that bunch of money is wasted. And I'll give you one last analogy. In a war game exercises, the United States military, the Navy, went up against, I think it was a Denmark or Danish sub or whatever. It sunk our ships. We lost. The reason that we lost is because that sub was using an engine that was older than the newer engines. And we could not hear the sub. So the sub was effectively invisible from our systems, in which case it could take out our ships one after the next. Just because you have a technological military, and just because you spend $1 trillion on a military, that has nothing to do with the effectiveness of that military, especially with other countries that are looking to counter the things that you're doing. We are wasting gobs of money instead of dumping that money into things in the society itself. Expansion of Social Security. Making sure our kids can go to school without massive amounts of debt being dumped on their heads, putting them in indentured servitude for the rest of their life. Yes, you can choose your plantation, but you're going to work on a plantation. Or for that matter, healthcare. Making sure that if you're born in this country, your birthright is healthcare, because we're a butterfucking society. But no, we're spending $1,280 on coffee cups. I'll end it here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Thanks all.